It's just in the capacity that we're talking with you today. You are a hydrologist, and you are also consulting with Salt Lake City. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. When were you last, I guess, up in the watershed taking a look at some of Utah's snowpack?
I was in Emigration Canyon today for most of the day. And what I found was that Emigration still has enough snow left for about a 3-day peak. We have 3 days more of these high flows, probably estimated to be around 150 CFS. We anticipate it to reach peak flows or the highest flows of the day around midnight tonight, and that's going to last through Thursday.
Brian, based on what you saw, in easy to understand terms, what does that mean for people in that area and that live along Emigration Creek or near it?
If you live in Emigration Creek, what you can expect with these temperature increases are very similar to the highest flows we've seen so far this year. Also, they can feel better that probably by Thursday, we're going to be running out of snow with the combine of the weather that we're going to see, which is a cooling trend. And at that time, when that cooling trend ends somewhere in the second week of May, Emigration should be out of enough snow so we won't see these high flows again this year.
Is that just specific to Emigration Creek?
That's specific to Emigration Creek alone.
Okay.
And if we look at the rest of the Wasatch, along the Six Creeks area, City Creek still has a ways to go. City Creek typically peaks 2 weeks later than Emigration, and Big and Little Cottonwood are also going to be problematic, and they're going to peak sometime in mid-June. So we have a ways to go on most of the watersheds. Red Butte and Emigration are running out of snow. We've seen high flows on Emigration. We'll see how that goes. Additionally, Harley still has a great deal of snow yet to come off in the mountain, and then we'll see how that plays out as it gets down into the valley.
Are there one or two areas that give you more concern than the others, and which would those be?
My feeling is when we look at the entire Six Creeks area, City Creek just has such little ability to control the meltwater coming out, and we have downtown Salt Lake right at the mouth, but yet we have to wait and see how it comes off. If we continue to see weather like this, where we've got 3 or 4 days of warm and then a cold front moves in, cools things off, peak flows along that area might not be as high as anticipated. But if we start seeing a rapid warm up that lasts, 10 days, that could be problematic. Also, if we see any kind of rain events between now and really June 1st that are of any significance when these peak flows occur, that's problematic. But I think if we just look at what we are experiencing right now along the Wasatch Front, this cooling trend is welcome because we've had quite a warm temperature regime that's produced some really high peak flows along some of the lower elevation watersheds. Those have picked up, those have caused some problems, but now we're going to cool it back down. And that weather has been something we've seen all the way through April and now into May, where we've had periods of warming, picked up the melt. Now we're seeing periods of cooling, slow down the melt. And it's been quite advantageous for the melt scenario when you have a record snowpack like we have now.
So basically what you're telling me is that going back to a couple weeks ago when Emigration Creek crested, to now, you are kind of liking this pattern that we're seeing of a few warm days followed by a little bit of a cold snap, a couple more warm days followed by a cold snap. You're saying that's advantageous for this snow melt off?
Yeah, I think the engineers in public utilities in Salt Lake City are very happy with the way the weather has shaped this runoff. We've had periods of warm, say 3 or 4 days, up to 5 days of hot temperatures, and then followed by cooler temperatures. So it'll start melting the snow off, and then what happens is it freezes it back up and damps the meltdown. We're now into May. Now what we look at is about 7,500 feet if we're going to keep seeing a 24-hour melt cycle like we see right now. That into this weekend is not going to happen. It's going to kind of freeze up at the higher elevations and then slow that melt, which is good to keep the peak flows down. The volumes are going to still be very high. The snow has to come off. It's how that runoff is shaped. And then we look at typically when do these areas melt out? And then where are we right now with snow, with peak flows? And we're doing okay right now.
How about the cottonwoods? You mentioned the cottonwoods a few minutes ago. What do we make of the cottonwoods? As I understand it, there is just still a lot of snow up in the cottonwoods.
Yeah, the cottonwoods typically peak about the third week of June. We're in the May 1st right now, so we've got a ways before we start seeing melt come off. They're yielding meltwater out of their lower parts of the canyon on the south aspects and the lower north aspects, but it's that middle elevation snow that really is blanketed all the way across the Wasatch that we're waiting to see. And we have forecasts that call for some very high peaks coming out of Big and Little Cottonwood, and that is probably around mid-June, possibly the third week of June. So we're still a ways away. A lot could happen during that time if we continue with this warm, cooling trend, warm, cooling. We could bring this off with a minimal amount of problems and damage. But if we start seeing a rapid rise of heat, and it just keeps that way for a long period of time, high pressure, then we'll see higher peaks. We can forecast weather, roughly the National Weather Service can forecast weather for about 5 days out with any accuracy. So you can see when you say what's going to happen about mid-June, we're still far away. And we'll have to kind of play it by ear as we go along.
Okay. So I think a lot of people throughout the state, they're maybe getting news on their phone, on TV, wherever, and they're seeing that there are flood warnings, advisories, watches in different parts of the state. What do people to make of the rest of this week? Obviously, we're sitting here on Monday. We've got a couple more warm days in the forecast. What do you think the ultimate takeaway is for people as we continue on through the week?
I think if you live anywhere near a waterway, you should expect high flows through Thursday. And then at that time, the weather's going to cool off. You should expect your flows to get lower. But understand that we're in for the long haul for some of these watersheds. Also understand that these waterways are incredibly cold and fast, and they're dangerous. Every year, people drown in these rivers and streams all throughout the area. If you have any kids, keep them away from there. Keep your pets away from any of the streams. Don't go into the canyons to go picnicking during this time. It's a very dangerous time all the way through the Six Creeks area. Something to be avoided. And really, we'll see how much damage we have as these flows come off of the mountain.
When you say we'll see how much damage, for someone like myself who may be a little naive to a statement like that, tell me a little bit more about what you mean about that.
Anytime you have record snowpack along the Wasatch Front like we're seeing this year, when we've done an analysis of on April 1st, typically that's when you have your highest snowpacks of the year, then they start melting off. You compare the snowpack that we've had this year to 35 years of record, 35 other years on April 1st. This was the biggest snowpack that's been recorded by the people that do the recording of the snowpack. So when you then take that snowpack and then you look at the soil moisture and then you plug it into a model and you say, give me the weather from 1991, and you get a trace coming out of that, a hydrologic trace. And then you say, give me 1992, you get another trace, and you get 30 traces. If you look at where we are on those traces, most likely we should be in the upper fringe of what has happened in the past, and we've had damage due to flooding. We've also seen damage from Emigration this year. We're seeing Sugar House Park filling up as a precaution. And then when you look at the briefings that have been done by Salt Lake City Public Utilities and their engineers and all the people associated with it, they're game planning for any kind of problematic high flows that come through. They place sandbags throughout the area. They've been working for years really to channel this water. And they're game planning on how to get the water to where it's going to go, where it's not going to damage the infrastructure or put people's lives at risk. And so far, so good. We've had some damage, but hopefully we'll keep that to a minimum. But anytime you look at high flows, record snowpack, there's bound to be some damage in our future. There's jams in creeks. Roads get overtopped. If we have a rain event, our window of opportunity to get out of this is very, very small. We're hoping for more of this dry weather, a little bit of cold, a little bit of warm, and we'll see how it goes. But most likely we're going to get a rain event during that time from between now and mid-June, or we're just going to see an excessive warm up that extends beyond this nice 5-day window. It could get 10 days. And with a warming climate that we've seen now, our potential to produce very high temperatures very quickly and keep those high temperatures for days on end becomes more probabilistic as we warm our climate. So all of these things combined paint a picture that says your window of opportunity to get out of a runoff year with minimal flooding with a record snowpack is quite small. We've been doing quite well so far. That could change, but we'll see how it goes. For the next 5 days, we appear to be in good shape, and let's just keep that going.
What we know about historical temperatures in the month of May, I guess, your average temperature during the month of May, do we take a look at, I know we can't forecast, with a lot of accuracy beyond 5 days, but based on what we know historically about what the temperature is during the month of May, is that cause for concern at all? I mean, does it get significantly warmer on average, historically speaking, later in May that we may have to worry about?
Yeah, a couple of things to think of. In late May, really all through May, your temperatures are increasing on average. It's getting warmer and warmer until we hit, sometime in July or August when we reach climatologically the warmest period. But if you start melting in March, and we typically do this with climate change, your ability to keep that water is reduced. If you continue with cold weather all the way into May, into the end of May, and then you flip the switch and turn the heat on then you have bigger problems. If you can kind of find that sweet spot, and we have, where you start melting snow sometime in early April, before you get to that possibility that you're going to have these really hot temperatures expected in mid-May, late May, and into June. And also the sun's angle becomes much higher in the sky. Solar radiation is your biggest input to melt snow. So the farther you keep this really large snowpack into May and into June, the ability and the energy that's going into that snowpack will melt it at a much faster rate. And you don't want to see that. You want to start melting it in sometime in April like we've been doing. We had a little bit of a lag really from about the third week of April, but so far the snow has been coming off quite well with that window of 5 days warming, 5 days cooling, and we haven't seen any major precipitation events.
Okay, Brian, anything else that I missed based on what you see when you go up there in the watershed?
No, I think the biggest thing I saw today was Emigration is going to have 3 days of peak flows, and they're going to be some of the highest peaks we've seen this year. But then at that point, when the cold front moves in, we're going to be out of snow to produce these high peak flows when the hot weather continues again sometime next week.
And is that how it works? I mean, you kind of take a look at Emigration because that's the one that's really running off right now, and then after that runs off, you'll go to the next one. Is that kind of how you go along the line there?
Yeah, so as a hydrologist, what you do is you look at the big picture and then you game plan. What basin is going to produce some pretty high flows that could damage structure and produce problems and safety for people who live there? You start with the low elevation watersheds like Red Butte and Emigration. Then we'll move over to City Creek, see how that goes, and then keep an eye on Big and Little Cottonwood and then Mill Creek, and then see how that plays out. It actually works well that you can focus your resources on one or two basins at a time, and then when they run out of snow, move to this one. When that runs out of snow, then go over to Big and Little Cottonwood, and then when you're out of snow, then kind of do an assessment on how the forecast went and how it turned out. So it's been working out well so far, but that could change. Remember, our window of opportunity is really small.
Brian, thanks again for your time and your context. Much appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome. Call me anytime. We'll chat.
Thank you again.